Welcome to another episode of the Trailblazers Experience podcast. And today I'm really excited to have my next guest. So, Jennifer Opare-aryee, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. How are you?
I,
I think we've all had enough of the raining weather, so yes, me too. A little
Definitely.
sunshine, I think, will go a long way.
Yeah. So, just to introduce you as a guest, Jennifer is an HR specialist with several years' experience in the HR sector and founder of her HR consulting business. I think it's an interesting topic to have about HR and your journey and sort of understanding because HR itself has evolved over the years. But before we delve into that, just talk me through your career journey and what has led you to this stage.
I actually fell into HR purely by accident. So my initial intention was to be either a writer, a researcher, a journalist. But I wasn't really supported when I started having careers advice. I was signposted, I think, with the best of intention to try other options. I think one advisor in particular, I remember this vividly, said to me, "Green, if you want to be a broadcaster or a journalist, maybe you should try going up north." So I live in London, and they said competition is less fierce if you go up north or further into the country. I had a family member actually told me to stay away from that profession. And when you're a 15-year-old girl and somebody says stay away because a lot of people that kind of go into this career, they end up falling on drugs and alcohol and everything else, you take that as read, which is what I did. So I went to college not quite sure the direction of travel. So I was doing business and finance because why not? I don't regret that though,
Stability,
because
probably, because you're thinking stability, stable career, it's somewhere where
yeah,
I know what I'm getting into.
yeah, yeah. So I, did business and finance, and I was in college. I think we were required to do work experience. I can't quite remember what it was called back then, but we were required to do work experience. So I was placed with YMCA, working in the accounts department, and I knew right away it wasn't what I wanted to do. Accounting was not for me. Um, and I think I supported them doing their basic admin, but it wasn't the most pleasant experience. Not because the people were not nice; they were brilliant. They gave me loads of useful advice, which was a lot more that I had with my career advisors. When I was 15 and 14. But when I mentioned to them, I wasn't quite sure which aspect, because business and finance had several. I'll call them modules for now. Several subjects, and they asked me which one I enjoyed. I said, well, I enjoyed reading a lot and I enjoyed critical analysis.
Mhm.
And I would quite like to speak to other departments like marketing and HR. And back then it was called personnel, to have a sense of which direction I wanted to go into. So they set me up with different people from different departments, which was brilliant. And I got to spend a day with different heads of service to understand what they do, what the expectations are, what you'll be doing day to day. My first degree was in business and finance because that was the advice I was given, because there was the opportunity to then go into HR to specialize purely in HR, but to have the back or the fallback of other areas like marketing if HR doesn't work out. So I thought it was a brilliant plan. Went off to university, knew from I think the first semester I was going to do HR. So by the time we get to the second year, pretty much had lined up tutors, spoken to the tutors, made sure that it was the right direction for me. So when we had to select our core subject, I went into HR.
Well, there's a big lesson there, Jennifer, in terms of, sometimes you go on to study one thing, but because of your curiosity in terms of understanding, okay, where else could this lead me, where else could that take me, that sort of put you in the trajectory that you were going in to say, right, HR is then the direction I want to take.
Yeah, definitely. And then I went on to do my master's degree in human resources and also to do my CIPD at the same time. So I was a little bit of a sucker for punishment. When I started to look into, after my first degree, I started to look to go, first of all, into the work environment. And everybody was asking for CIPD qualification. I think it's changed slightly, but back then it really was such a major requirement to break through the profession. So I started thinking through, do I want to do my CIPD now and do my master's later on? Or could I find a university that will allow me to do both at the same time? So I ended up finding a university and I ended up combining my master's, the CIPD, and I did both at the same time. And what was good about that particular course, and I know they refresh and change things, but the requirement to enter, to get your master, the requirement to apply for the masters is based on whether you're already working in HR. So I had to look for work over the summer period leading up to my application to ensure that I was working in the HR department
Wow, to gain work experience as well.
to gain a work experience. And I think once I started, I could see the benefit of why there was a requirement because I think, you have the theory side and you have the practical side, and they go hand in hand. There are some things about lived experience or the practice of HR that you cannot teach. And I think it's really useful to have had that experience and that exposure before going into the master's degree. And it was quite intense, I have to say. We had lectures over weekends, but we had 2 days during the week where, again, you're supposed to use that 2 days working in an established HR department to continue to build on that experience. So that's what I did. And I think I was really clear that I was going to remain in HR after university. I wasn't sure which area in HR I was going to go into. So I decided to just ensure that I had a broad experience in HR and not necessarily pigeonhole myself into either recruitment or other aspects of HR. Interesting enough, I met a very helpful lawyer. So I was working for a hospital at the time whilst I was doing my degree, and we had a solicitor firm as a provider. And I met one of the partners who encouraged me to do employment law, which actually you get to do on the master's degree. But he wanted me to branch away and specialize. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Great advice. Want to do HR for 5 years, get the broad experience, and then revisit going back into just specializing into employment law. And unfortunately, I never went back. However, I think, I have gone on to achieve everything that I wanted to do in HR. I think there are definitely areas that I know it's just not for me. So I would do recruitment, but I didn't want to specialize in recruitment. But I do the strategic side of recruitment. How to make sure that you get the right candidates coming in. The easiest example I can give is I was asked recently about developing a strategy based on high performing employees. And I said, well, that's great. But what does that look like for you? We got to start off by defining what is a high performer, not as defined by other people, but for you as your business, what does a high performer means? Does your value fits into it? And if that's the case, then the starting point is who do you have now? Do they have the values? If not, how do we get them the values? And then you want to go back and revisit how the people are coming in, how you're recruiting the people. Are you recruiting them in line with your values, or are you just casting your net to see who you can find? So I enjoy that side of it. I don't tend to enjoy so much the hands-on side of recruitment, but at least I've had the journey of experiencing different areas within HR to know which areas I prefer and which areas I don't prefer. And I think that's quite useful for anybody wanting to make the leap from a corporate HR setting into setting up their own HR business. You need to be very clear what your core functionalities are, what your service offerings are. Um,
And
not to say,
that sort of come about from you going into studying and saying, right, I want to get the broad experience so that I have an understanding of HR, and the various aspects of it. And that's where you've now been able to say, well, I think now I want to specialize in these three or four key areas. I think it's a good lesson to learn, because sometimes I think, I mean, I felt even in at the beginning of my career where I thought I have to be very specific about, the area that I want to go into. But actually, in your early days, you can sort of, when I say experiment a bit more, get broader understanding, broader experience, and then as you grow, you can then say, I want to specialize in these areas because those are my strengths, that's where my interests are. It's a very good lesson for the audience out there who are thinking, what do I do?
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest lessons I learned earlier on is I'm African. My parents are from West Africa, Ghana in West Africa, brought up the African way, and um, things like business studies isn't really the expectation. So just as a lesson, my father, not that he didn't encourage me, but he wanted me to go into politics. So when I was choosing my college subjects, I wanted to do law because I was passionate about law. I wanted to do English and English literature because I like reading. But he wanted a child, one of his children, to be an MP. So he was choosing my subjects for me. And I forgot to say that's how I fell into business studies. But when I started university, I think, when you meet other African children who have been brought up by African parents, there is that mentality of, oh, what course are you doing business studies? And you're automatically dismissed because everybody else is doing some major science subject,
Hmm.
or they're going to be a doctor, a lawyer. And business studies is not really respected in a way that it should do.
Yeah.
Um, and I lived with people who were unsure what their direction of travel is. They were following the expectation, the agenda of what I guess the African community expects their children to grow up or aspire to be. And I had several comments, and I think you have to be very clear about your why, and that for me is so important, especially where you come to an age 18 and you can be easily influenced. I've seen people drop out of I saw people drop out of colleges, sorry, their courses, because it just wasn't, it's not that they were incapable, they just didn't have the passion for it. So I think, you're going to spend a lot of money. When I went to university, it was free. If you're going to spend a lot of money, you have to be sure that you're not being influenced by outside voices and outside noises. I think every career has a value,
Yeah, I
whether
totally
it's a
agree.
lawyer, whether it's, HR, whatever it is, there is a value. And if that's what you want to be, you want to go in to do, then I think, you should pursue and not allow outside noises to distract you from that.
Yeah, and pursue it and want to excel in it, whatever sector, branch it is. Say, okay, this is the trajectory I'm taking, and I'm going to give it my all and be the best in that particular area as well. And it really hit home with the African parent mentality. So, for those who don't know our culture, so I'm Zambian. I think it stemmed from the fact that in their minds, certain careers meant stability, longevity, and they just wanted the best for us, to be fair. But it's good to know that we're now in a time or generation where whatever you choose, whatever career path, as long as you're the best at that and excel, it's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, being in the space that I'm in, it's good to have my experience and share that with the younger generation to say, this is what you want to do. Let's look at why you want to do it. Let's look at how you
Yes.
can get there. And,
Yeah.
I think the generation we have, they are blessed in the sense that they have access to technology.
Oh
So they
yeah.
can learn so much so quickly,
Yeah.
which is brilliant. I'm not saying that, you don't have the downsides of it, but you can connect with so many people and get or find aspiring role models that you can see how they arrive at their destination, that can then cement what you're trying to do a lot easier than when I was growing up, when you didn't have Facebook or other social media. I don't think LinkedIn was even around back then for me to be looking on LinkedIn to say, well, who is out there that I can see from their story how they started out. I can use that as a springboard, if that makes sense. So just sharing my little nuggets of knowledge
For
with
sure.
someone.
This is why we're doing this as well. So, obviously, you graduated and you worked for a number of years for different organizations. What then made you decide to take the leap and say, time now to open my consultancy? Talk me through that.
Oh, there's a number of reasons for that, to be honest with it. It's always in the bag that I would want to have some kind of business. Back then, it was a side hustle. But, my grandma, who was my role model and continued to be, even though she's passed on, always gave advice of having more than one income. What she I'm trying to paraphrase what she used to say. So it's translation from our language into English is you must be able to eat from your hands. So have your formal education, but have a vocational skills,
Mm.
whether it's sewing, cake baking, or whatever it is. So I have tried various things in trying to have some kind of side hustle on the side. I have dabbled into cake decorations, dressmaking, and the list goes on. And I think ultimately I circle back to the fact that, well, I'm a HR profession, so it's a good starting point. I have over 20 years experience, post qualification in HR. So I must be doing something right. So I set up my HR business initially is that old cliche. I wanted to have complete control and independence of what I do, when
Mm.
I do it, with whom and where. And I wanted to change the narrative about my own career. I didn't want to wait for someone to decide whether I'm worthy for a promotion or not. I think I got the as I climbed up the ladder, I got tired of having feedback to say, oh, you're really good. But when it comes to careers, well, promotions above the level I was on, I was overlooked.
Mm.
Um, and I wasn't really given any feedback to work on, any constructive feedback. So I started to think about, well, I can change the narrative. I don't need to be a victim. I don't need to remain in the same space and wait for someone to decide I'm worthy enough. Ultimately, if being at the top will mean doing X and Y and Z, could I achieve the same thing by owning my business? So that's how I started it. Um, uh, uh, to look after my niece, my sister's daughter who lives in Ghana, who wants to be a doctor. So she wanted me to bring her over to England. So the second reason, then my initial reason shifted to actually, if I am working for myself, I'll have a bit more autonomy over my time so that I can do school run and everything else. So I started the process of getting a bigger house so that I can accommodate a child and maybe an au pair to help me look after the child. That was 2017, and towards the end of 2017, before we can even enter into a conversation of starting an application for my niece, my grandmother died December 2017. And to be honest, it was a major blow. It was unexpected, in spite of the comments from other people about the fact that she was an old lady and, she lived a good life
It's
and
still a
that she
loss at the end of the day, isn't it? Still a loss. Yeah.
absolutely, it's still painful today. I yes, I know we all die, and it's death is a guarantee. It's probably the most constant and certain thing in life. But I wasn't expecting her to go. Call it my innocence, naivety. I don't know. So she died, and that put the plans on hold. Um, then my gear kind of shifted into not necessarily on the business, but creating a legacy for her. And that legacy led to a charity that I set up in memory of her to try and make sure that children have access to basic education, which is something that she was denied as a young girl. And that is my current passion and my why for doing the business, why I want the business to succeed, because it will give me the absolute freedom, financial freedom, to be able to continue the work that I've already started in making sure that children have access to education. So that's my why for doing it. Um, and even though my grandma was I would say the chain force behind that decision, it's become much more than that. I think I found purpose through my pain, and it's made the pain manageable, but also knowing that I am in a position to be able to make a change in someone's life, even though it may be a very small change. I want to know that if somebody is unable for whatever reason to stay in education, that generation cycle is broken. And I have seen a lot to know that sometimes it could be something as small as lack of uniform or books that may keep a child from remaining in school. And unfortunately, some of these children become prey for predators.
Mm.
And then they then put in a family way at a very young age, and the generation cycle just continues and is not broken. So if I can make a very small change and break that cycle for somebody, I think I will find my mission in life worldwide. So that's where I am at the moment.
That is so inspirational. It feels like you found your purpose, your mission of what you're looking to do, not just from a professional perspective, but also from a personal. Talk to me about your values. What's important to you?
I think right now for me it's about giving back, not because I have an abundance of money or time or anything. But I think you get to a point in life where you ask yourself, what's the point of life? And that question for me is a daily question, especially since my grandma died. I look back to all the things she did and achieved, even without education. And I can honestly say that she achieved far more with lack of qualification than I have done. So that's where the inspiration is coming from, giving back. And not just giving back in terms of the charity that I'm doing, but if somebody, sometimes I call this pick me up. Somebody's asking you something about, oh, I'm not sure. It's that old imposter syndrome. You can see we all get that. It doesn't matter who you are. If someone's having that day where they go around in circles, and I have experienced that where, I'm starting the business, I'm thinking, can I really do it? Do I know everything? Do I need another couple more years before I can do it? Oh, I've made a mistake and beating myself up. And it's about recognizing that we all make mistakes, and actually life is a journey and a learning experience. And you're not going to know everything, but having a network of people that may have the answers that you don't know. So taking a young girl, my nieces, for example, and just trying to teach them basic life surviving skills, not as they know it according to TikTok, but according to some of the work ethics that I've been given,
Yeah.
which is why I always say to them, look, one of my niece who's 17, she is very skilled in technology, and I keep saying to her, you're running around looking for work experience, but actually you can do things I can't do. You can use Canva to manipulate and do branding, do this, create website. That is something that you can run as a business.
Mm.
You just need to think through, how am I going to do this? Where would I get my audience? And how can I make myself visible so that I can attract people?
Yeah. I mean, your
I
phone
think
is
it's
your
about that.
asset in terms of starting your own business, isn't it? And in terms of your work ethic, what are some guiding principles that you live by?
Regardless of who you work for, just work hard and give it your all. Just leave at the end of the day knowing that you have done your absolute best. And I'm going to define that separately from, and this is based on years of maturity. I used to think my best is I need to know everything.
It's
So
inspiring,
not just
isn't
showing up.
it? Oh my God, that resonates. As you get older, you think, I need to know everything. And then you realize, oh, it's okay that I don't have all the answers. I can
Yeah,
delegate, I can ask, I can seek
yeah,
advice. Is
yeah,
a game changer.
yeah, yeah. So for me, my best isn't necessarily that I have to know everything, but in my field, build a strong network of people that I can connect with, that I can relate to, that I can go back and say, hey, I don't know the answer to this. Can you help me out? But when I do show up, make sure that I show up. So not just show up and stare into the computer for 7.5 hours or 8 hours, but show up in every way that counts. If someone's going to pay me to do a job, then I'm going to show up and give them the very best version of me. But I also strive to make sure that I'm continuously developing.
Mm.
So I sign up for everything that will make sure that my knowledge, is refreshed. And that's the best advice I can give to young people. You will never know enough. I don't think life is meant to be that way. With the best of respect to our leaders, our prime ministers, even King Charles or presidents of other countries, they don't know everything. And that's why they have a team of advisors. And, you don't have to be a president to build yourself a team of advisors. And thankfully, with technology, you can build a good network of people that you can go to and say, how do I deal with this? Or I'm approaching this way. Am I on the right track? Because sometimes you just need somebody to say, yes, you are, to have the confidence to continue. So that's the best advice I can give in terms of work ethics. Show up and give your best.
Definitely some really good ones there. Talk to me about your business. So do you have a team? Is it just yourself? And then also, what have been your biggest achievements that you're really proud of from that aspect? I saw you laughing there. You're like, it's only me.
It's only me. I am the jack of all trade, I have to say. And I
Love it.
think I'm not unique in that sense. I think most people running the businesses will say that it takes you out of your comfort zone, I must say. For example, doing a podcast, if you had spoken to me a year ago, I would have told you, no way. I'm not putting myself out there that way. But I think, you have to be visible if you're running a business. People need to know who you are. But you also need to be able to stand out. And
Mm.
that's where you have your authority by making sure you do webinars and other live events so that people can know what you're able to do, people by people. And, the more you're visible and the more you're doing sessions, people are able to then connect to know that they are in safe hands. That's how I would describe it. So yeah, but for me, I had to learn to be everywhere, basically. Everywhere that counts. So business networking, again, a year ago, I would have told you, no way, it's not for me. Because I like to be at the background, to
Mm.
get on with it. I'm not one for putting myself out there to be seen. But being in business is all about being visible and being seen at the right places. So networking, it's really key. You end up becoming some kind of IT type specialist and everything specialist because you have to do your bookkeeping, which again most people do. You become the PA. I mean, I'm juggling like 4 calendars and trying to keep up with it. Always like, oh god, it's exhausting. Perhaps it's time to consider bringing somebody in to help me. That's another thing. Recognizing when you need help. There's 24 hours in a day. And at some point, even if you keep going, your body's going to tell you it's time to take a break. And it's at that point that you need to think about what help do I need, and where to find that help because there are help out there and people will help you. So my biggest achievement, I would say, and I'm probably going to go back to the charity that's set up, is being able to go back to Ghana end of November to restore a library for a local school and give out notebooks and use clothes. And seeing the smile on the children's faces and the impact that something like even a balloon made to a child, I think for me is probably my proudest achievement.
So I'm hearing not only that, the fact that you have been able to start your own business, run it yourself, learn all aspects of the business, getting outside of your comfort zone, and then not only generate, income for yourself, but being able to give back is
Mm,
has been a very,
mm,
very
mm.
big part.
Yeah,
Jennifer, how do you take care of you? Obviously, there's the charity, giving back to others. Is that a thing? Do you believe in self-care? How do you balance that? How do you take care of you?
I absolutely believe in self care. I think, again, it's taken me a long time to get to this point where I know I've reached my limit and I know when to stop and kind of shut down from everything. And it's what I call it, it's time to be selfish, me. Because going back in time, my health has suffered as a result of doing too much and not taking time off. And I think I can only be the best version of me if I'm able to take time and rest. Because it's not going to matter and make any difference in creating any legacy if I keel over and God forbid I die. Or I'm in bed for months on end and I'm not able to achieve anything. That's only going to set me back. So I think I'm at a point in my life where I tell myself, it's okay. You don't have to be a superwoman. Because there is this thing, unspoken thing sometimes, that you need to be strong, or you're expected to be strong, even when nobody's told you that. That's something that I've had to work really hard on. That, ooh, people can't see me to be vulnerable. People can't see me to be tired. I have to keep going, even though internally, you're seeing signs that your body actually can't take anymore. And I'm no longer at the point where I have to wait for sicknesses to strike me down and not being able to do anything before I take time out. So I like to read.
Mhm.
And I read anything. I'm not particularly fussy about what I read. I'm also a Christian, and I'm smiling now because I like a good music. That's where I go into my space.
Yeah.
One of my friends that I lived with will tell you whenever she hears Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, she's smiling because when we were at uni, if I want to clean, I'll start blasting Whitney Houston and Aretha Franklin, and
No,
it's
and they
not
say,
you know.
Jennifer, you haven't cleaned your house unless you've played an Anita Baker album from end to end. Then your house ain't clean. It's like,
It's not, but it's not so much. I need the music as a motivation. It's because it's a calming
of
influence, and it
course,
takes me out of myself.
yeah.
So I'm in that moment. I'm not thinking about bills. I'm not thinking about anything. It's the joy that I'm feeling from that moment. So that's how I take care of me. Can I do more? Absolutely. Because the old me of I need to achieve everything because life is short and I need to be able to have done absolutely everything. Sometimes still creeps in, is always sitting, on my shoulder telling me, you haven't done this, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. And actually 2 days ago I was sharing with a lady that I met from a networking event. I like to have a to-do list. And that used to give me anxieties at the end of the day because if I get to the end of the day and let's say I have 10 items and I can only tick one, I beat myself up. But actually, I'm now at the point, particularly, we're now going into the second quarter of the year. I look back to what I started in January and what I've been able to do. Some of these things are not in my plans, but they are good achievement and they are achievement to be celebrated. So even if I look at my, to-do list, I'm thinking, okay, I had 10 items and I can tick one. I'm not going to beat myself out up for, I'm not going to beat myself up on that because I need to reflect on all the other things that I've achieved because you have 24 hours in a day. And if, I don't know, 2 hours is going to go into podcast, for example, something else is going to take a backseat at the end of the day. And it's okay. It's about, okay, if I made a list from 1 to 10 and they were all a priority, but during the course of the day, something happened to change that. For example, a phone call because somebody is upset and they need my help. That becomes a priority because that's more important to me than anything that's on the to-do list. And if it takes half a day, well, that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not going to give myself, beat myself up. In the past, I would stay up till 4 a.m., 5 a.m., try to finish everything on a to-do list, because I've given somebody 5 days of my 5 hours of my time. It's no longer the case for me, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, Warren Buffett says when you write down a list, like you said, a to-do list, write down all the things you want to do, and then he says just focus on three, because really that's all you're going to achieve. And you've just testified to that. And then also be flexible because plans change, priorities change as well. That's a really big thing. Um, Talk to me about what you're reading right now. What you talked about self-care, which is music, reading. What are you reading right now that's inspiring you or calming you, or is it just tabloids, magazines, or is it actual? Is it the
It's
Bible? I don't know. What are
it's
you reading right now?
actually it's actually nothing exciting, believe it or not. I'm researching and reading about different websites. I'm trying to build my website.
Okay.
And I probably spent way too much time looking at other people's website. But I want to make sure that the language is right. I don't want to carelessly throw words away. I want the language to connect with my audience, to be relatable. And that's probably why it's taking me too long. But also, I like to read about this is the boring me, the about section of people,
Mm. Okay.
because it's always an inspiration, and it can motivate me sometimes. Some people give more stories, and that's what I look out for. Um, and I think it opens to me the different possibilities that I hadn't considered. So I've looked at different website, and in a conversation again with the lady that I met 2 days ago, she in talking to her about different things I wanted to. She said, have you thought about doing a podcast on this subject or a webinar on this subject? I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, now that you've mentioned it, I haven't thought about that, but yeah, it's a good angle, it's a good thing. But I've also had a lot of feedback from people talking about writing a book.
I feel
And
like
when I,
you've got so much. I was about to say that you've just hit the nail on the head. You have such a wealth of experience, knowledge, and probably because of your curiosity. Yeah, what areas would you like to then talk about if you were to write a book? Have you thought about it?
yes, I have actually. Funny you should ask that. So when my grandma died, I think a year after she died, I had met with a coach. It was one of these discovery session on a Boxing Day. And we were talking about my aspiration and things I wanted to do. And somehow my grandmother came in the conversation. It had nothing to do with, personal, but she came in the conversation, and I talked about briefly the pain of losing her. And not feeling as if, I think I checked out. That was my way of surviving. So during the funeral, I was there, but I wasn't really there. So
Mm.
she talked to me about writing like a letter to say goodbye. But what I tend to do is when I have ideas, I tend to put it on the notes section of my phone. It's the best thing Apple created. So I've
I
got
know, right?
loads of information and stories that started. I call them different chapters. So it started off with just me. Um, I call it talking to myself, just expressing virtually the thoughts going through my head. But I think a lot of people give me feedback about finding things I say to be inspirational. So I'm caught between, that's the word, need another HR book about my experience, what makes me so unique, or just maybe just writing something that somebody could find inspirational.
Yeah.
And, that for me
It could
will
even be
be
like a little pocket book, something that's really small, something they can carry around, lift out when they need to just get a few tips here and there. You could start with that and just build like
yeah,
a collection as well.
yeah.
Let's talk about what you think makes you unique. Reflecting on the years, your experience. What do you think are your superpowers, Jennifer, as a woman?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I think I like to connect with people, and I like to understand what motivates people and where they're going. And I've had to work hard at not giving people advice immediately I hear their story, but just taking a stand back and listening.
Just active
Um,
listening, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So a year ago, I was on a coaching course with this lady who's, I think, is absolutely amazing. So she's a clinician by background, but she also likes to bake cakes.
Hmm.
And we had to go into a breakout session to practice some of the skills, the coaching skills. And she was my partner. And when we finished, I gave her feedback. which was around when she was talking about her profession, her career that she strived really hard for. There was an energy there, but I didn't get the same energy from when she was talking about her cake making hobby.
Mm.
Um, because all of a sudden her energy changed. And what she said to me is, how did you make the distinction? I said, when you started to talk about your cake, your shoulders went up, your face and your eyes were smiling.
It's the
And there
body
was just,
language and signals, isn't it, Jennifer? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And she was really moved by that. And she said, thank you for seeing me. So I have learned not to give advice because I think my fallback position is if I see a need, I have to help. But sometimes helping isn't what the person wants. Sometimes it's just about listening. And when
Mm.
she said to me is thank you for seeing me, it stayed with me
Hmm.
and it's become one of my superpowers. Just trying to discern when someone just wants to be seen and heard versus giving them advice.
Yeah. Yeah. There's who was it? Yes, I was watching her. Her name is Candice. I can't pronounce her name because she's gonna then slate me on social media, but she's an influencer. And she was talking about how when she goes to, in this example, her husband, they got this thing where it says, do you want comfort or do you want solutions? And then there's a difference. So what you're saying is depending on who you're speaking to, do they just want to be listened to, heard, comforted, or is it someone saying, hey Jennifer, I need advice on this, and then you go with your advice? I've had to learn that as well because I was always, even with my siblings, because they're all younger than me, I'm the oldest of eight, I've always been wanting to give a solution, give advice. And sometimes, especially now, everyone's an adult, they have to make their own decisions, and you just sometimes
Mm,
just need to be there as a sounding board and say, okay, and that's it. Very difficult to do, as well. Or even with my kids, it's challenging because I always want to give advice, and sometimes you
mm,
need to take a step back. So that's a good
mm.
superpower to have, actually, Jennifer.
Oh,
uh,
thank you. It can be difficult because sometimes even when people want advice, they don't necessarily say they want advice.
mm,
But you can pick up on phrases and how something sounds to check in to say you're looking, for help. You don't necessarily have to use the word help or good, but you can pick up if you're watching and observing someone's body language. You can
mm-hmm,
pick up on when they need help because communication isn't always about what we say. It's also about how we carry ourselves and how we project ourselves in different forums. And I go one or two ways. You can get a Jennifer that doesn't you can't shut me up basically. But, but it depends on the setting in the forum. Or you can get Jennifer. And I think I do a lot of my reflective work when I'm actually quiet.
mm,
And it doesn't mean I'm not engaging. I'm just observing. I'm just
yeah,
trying to find what play I'm going to be in that forum.
mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, no,
Especially,
sometimes you just need to go within yourself to say, right, I'm reflecting now, and that's okay as well. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
get that.
So, I go one or the I can be quiet and then observe to know, okay, that person, is on the same value wavelength as me. I think I can connect with that person. But I think growth also, for me right now is I know that relationships takes time to form.
Mm,
And sometimes it's just about, for example, one of those business networking, the one-on-one, that somebody will say something, it's a light bulb moment that that you've connected with the person, a relationship can evolve from that. And not necessarily about, let's meet up, let's have lunch, let's do this. So I've learned to just take that step back, observe, wait, listen, and see who I am able to connect with and just allow the relationship to organically grow.
mm. That's a very good one. So it sounds like you are very much into networking, going to networking events, building contacts, and you've already shared your tip that you just need to let it keep going to the networking events, but let it build organically. What other things have you learned through networking that you think you can share with the audience?
I think don't go in with the intention of selling, even though that's what you're going to do, because you're there to be visible and to grow your business and you want to have clients. And I think everybody is there to do the same thing. But what I know, which is more memorable, is when someone is listened to.
Mm.
So you can give your card out. Um, I've collected loads of cards. I can tell you won't remember, especially when it's a sea of people. But if you have a meaningful conversation with someone, so I would say go with the intention of not selling, but having a meaningful conversation by understanding who's in the room, what is their pain point, and how you can add value. That's the best advice I can give.
And also, Jennifer, don't you think in order for you to be a good networker, as you started off, you mentioned at the beginning about how you are curious, you're always immersing yourself in knowledge, in different areas, whether it's politics, HR, the more you know and able to expand your horizon, the more you're able to have conversations at these events. Otherwise, you
Mm,
just be blank
mm,
in terms of
mm,
what you can
mm,
talk about,
mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
that's important too.
I mean, some networking groups are quite structured, so they will send you a list of attendees with their websites and things like that. So it's always good to, I know reading is not for everyone, but it's always good to just have a quick glance
Mm,
at the website. And then when you meet with a person, you've got a starting point, if
exactly.
that makes sense. If
Yeah.
somebody likes posting pictures about their dog, you don't have to be a dog person,
Yeah.
but you can relate to this is what's important to that person, and therefore they're much more likely to speak about their dog. That's an icebreaker for you.
Yeah, definitely.
But
And
if
you
you don't
connect
do
with them
that,
too, as well, isn't it? If you know something about them, I tend to find when I've networked, had a conversation, like I will remember you by the fact you've talked about your charity. That's a key point. Versus if it was just purely, academic, you tend to forget it. You need to attach one thing to that specific person
mm,
as
mm,
well.
mm, yeah. So that's the advice. Do a little bit of research. It doesn't take a lot of time. Um, and just go in the room with the intention of having a meaningful conversation, because there will be moments in the day, I mean, you'll be given the opportunity to pitch your business.
Yeah.
There'll be moments in the day that you'll be able to connect with someone if you go with the aim of listening and giving somebody else the forum to connect.
Mm,
That also will help your business because, like I said, I'm in HR. There are loads of HR people out there. What would somebody remember about me?
yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and sometimes it's about allowing them to be seen,
Mm,
exactly that, and to be heard. If that, if there's someone in the room that likes to talk, let them talk.
mm.
That may be what's important to them, that may be what they need from the whole networking experience, and that's okay.
So you've talked about your career. I've looked at your, LinkedIn. If I was to say, what are three career achievements that you are proud of? What are they?
I think I'll go back to the very, very beginning. So when I started out, it was really difficult to get into HR. Everybody or every advert is asking for experience. I suppose it's probably the same now.
Mm,
And it's it's a bit daunting when you just come out of university and someone's asking you for and it wasn't the experience I had, but post qualification experience, really, really difficult. So I had done some, because of the master's degree, I had applied, and I was working for Le Meridian Hotel in Manchester as the HR administrator. And then I did some work experience in Manchester Airport, in the policy department. And then I think it was Royal Bank of Scotland during the summer. I spent my summer working for them. But I wanted, after my master's degree, being very ambitious, I wanted to be the next level up from an administrator. I wanted to be a HR advisor. And every single application is asking for experience. Right now, I have the maturity of saying that I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I am someone's cup of tea, and somebody will like what I'm offering. But back then, I had a sense of apprehension because I just wasn't ticking the criteria. And being a HR person, you look at a person's spec, you look at what they're asking for, you're thinking, not for me because I don't stand a chance. So I think the biggest achievement for me is overcoming that fear
Mhm.
and just applying, not in the traditional sense, but I ended up joining an agency. So I moved back from Manchester to London, and I ended up joining an agency, and that was how I got my um, that Teleli. So I was promoted into an acting up role when I was working in a hospital in Manchester to be a HR advisor, and then I moved back to London. But
Mhm.
that wasn't acting; that was somebody giving me the opportunity. It wasn't me applying for it and getting a job that way. So I joined an agency, and that was a game changer for me. I was offered an interview with a local council. I went for the interview, and I think when you're younger, maybe you don't have a sense of fear. But looking back, it took a lot of guts because it was not just a junior advisor role they were looking for; it was much more senior. But they brought me in and they said, "We interviewed you, we like you. What we need is a lot more senior. However, we think that you can do this for us. We have a number of complex employee relation cases, particularly sickness absence. So we're going to come in, we're going to bring you in to manage that for us." I said, great. I took it, but I didn't become complacent.
Mm.
So I think after my first week, I literally went knocking on the boss's door. I think she was the HR manager at the time. And I said, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's really great. I'm enjoying it, but you didn't give me the job that I came for because I'm lacking in experience. So can I shadow some of the senior team? Can they take me under their wing so that I can be exposed to what they're doing?" And that's my proudest moment. The timing was right. There were, I think there were a lot of care homes that were being closed by the council. They were either being privatized or being sold. So I managed to shadow one of the senior advisors in how to do change management. And that led to my
Great.
next level.
Yeah.
That led to my next role, which was a major restructure. Had I not asked the question, and it's an advice that I give people, I said, even if they turn you down, they offer you something else, take it, but make sure you make it very, very clear to them what your aspirations are. And I forgot to say that actually, when I got an acting up role, that was how it came about. It was having a conversation with the head of HR to make it. They didn't know I was doing a master's degree in HR. I said, "I'm doing a master's degree in HR. Obviously, that shows my commitment to the profession. This is what I'm looking to achieve." So when that opportunity came up, they remembered me. So it's about sowing a seed. And I think I've maybe I'm talking too much about my own achievement, but that's for me has been my proudest achievement, and it continues to be so. Positioning myself and making sure that I don't become comfortable in
Mm.
where I am, because it's easy to you want a job, right? You've been given the title of an advisor, that should be okay, but it wasn't okay for me because I can still see it's not exactly what I needed. There are
But
pockets and
Jennifer,
areas.
honestly, what I'm hearing here is a thread of, one lesson is you went if you go for the job that you wanted to get and they didn't give it to you, you need to be consistent and say, right, this is the career path. What needs to happen for me to get the role that I actually need?
Mhm,
Um, and sometimes it doesn't mean you have to take a step back to move
mhm,
forward, but like you said,
mhm,
don't be complacent and be open. I mean, change
mhm,
management, restructuring. Would you have learned that if you hadn't
mhm,
taken the opportunity? And we all know how HR has evolved so much, and there's so many aspects to that
mhm.
area as well. So I think it's really good advice. If
Mm,
you don't
mm.
ask, you don't get, and you have to be
Yeah.
consistent, persistent, knock on those doors. Yeah, blaze
And
through.
doors will be shut.
Oh yeah,
I think that's life. But a door will be open, and it's about how you then leverage that door that's open to you
that's
to
up to
get to
you.
where you need to be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you've already talked about your challenges, I think, even just to summarize them that you faced. I mean, the challenges of when you were in employment, not, being overlooked for promotions, but you kept going and then decided to start your own business. You are very curious, I think I would say. You are keen to improve yourself in the arena. If someone is listening in terms of they want to go into HR, what do you think are the next areas that you feel will be a key focus for HR? If someone's saying, I want to specialize in this
Yeah.
sector.
I think what worked for me and probably was the best foundation was having somebody already working in HR open that door to me to say there are different strands in HR. I think a lot of people that are outside the field automatically think recruitment. You
Yes.
know, you depend on the size of the organization. You have the
Yeah.
policy department, you have employee relations department, you've got, if they have the right model, depending on how large the organization, they will have a business partner that will just do a lot more of the strategic work. You've got workforce planning. It's a broad area.
Mm.
So I think spend time to get to know the profession and know where you want to be. Um, I know that I don't want to spend 5 days doing employee relations. It's absolutely draining. They don't teach you that at university. Really don't do that. But you soon discover that some people don't mind it at all. But I like to have the different breadth of experience within HR. So I'll say that's a good starting point beyond the degree to make sure you know what you're getting into. And, these days you can if I cast my mind back, we've had several university students when I was in corporate world that came in doing bank work as receptionists in HR. That's another way to know, well, actually, definitely not for me. But
Mm.
actually, sometimes being a receptionist is not going to expose you to everything as well. So whilst you're there, talk to the people already working in the
Mm.
different pockets of HR to know where you want to go into. And it's okay if you don't want to narrow yourself by going into a specialized area in HR, but you just want to have that breadth of experience. It's okay to start off there as well.
Really good advice. Talk to me about mentoring. Are you a mentor? Has someone mentored you over time? What do you think about it?
I am a mentor for different people. So some people sometimes just come to me, can you help me get through the next level? I want to get to this point in my career. Can you help me through that? Sometimes it's just ad hoc about coaching somebody through interview,
Mm.
for example. So I'd like to tell this story when I was coaching someone and I had told her about she said she was looking at the person's spec and they said I think being enthusiastic, and she said, well, how do you do that? How do you demonstrate that? And I said, well, that's easy. That's probably the easiest one. It's in your how you communicate, how you smile. That
Mhm.
will tell them how interested you are in the job or whether you're just after this because you need a job.
Being
So I said,
animated as
be
well, doesn't
intentional. Yeah,
it?
yeah. So I do mentoring as and when people need it and ongoing. But at the moment I've got one person that I'm mentoring and one person I've offered to mentor, but we haven't started the process yet. But I do it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Good way of giving back as well.
Mm. Mm.
So to circle back, we've talked about lots of things. You have such a lovely tapestry to your career and your career journey. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What does that look like for you the next few years?
This may sound like a cliche, but I like to be the better version of myself. And by that I mean I want the charity to have been registered, established. I would have liked to have helped a lot more children. And I would like to measure to know that at least 1 or 5 children's life have been transformed. And I would like my HR consulting business to still be functioning and still be running. And I'd like to continue to give back in the UK as well to people that may just need guidance or to be inspired. I think, if a child wants to do something, it's good to give advice, but we have to remember that the children are growing in a different kind of environment from the environment we grew up in. And sometimes you want to protect. And by seeking to protect, you may actually put a lot of fear, which is what I had that stopped me from my dream. Although I think the pathway that I'm on was always meant to
for you.
be this way, but it's just making sure that you don't crush someone's dream by looking to protect. Hopefully that answers your
Yeah,
question. And
no, it's beautiful. It's a good thing. Wanting to give back and being consistency. You've set your goal. If 1 in 5 children are successful or more, that's a great thing to aspire to. 3 trailblazer tips you'd give our audience out there.
I like to keep it simple, and I like to tell the story of Cinderella. Um, what we can learn from Cinderella is, yes, she wasn't treated kindly or fairly by her stepmom and siblings, but she didn't allow that to crush her spirit. She had to start off with a will to go to the ball, and somebody gave her a helping hand. So I think, regardless of the circumstances that you may find yourself in, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it feels impossible, your will is something you can control, and that desire will take you a long way, because somebody, like I said, you're not always going to be everybody's cup of tea. And that's why we have different flavors of tea. Somebody else will give you that opportunity. But in order for someone else to see you, you've got to demonstrate that passion and that willingness for what it is that you're trying to achieve. So
Well,
be a Cinderella and
hey,
have a will to go to the ball.
I love that. Have the will to go to the ball.
Yes.
That's a good one. Oh, Jennifer, this has been really, really good, insightful. I think, you know, why I love this podcast is getting to talk to amazing women, different sectors, and debunking the myth about HR and the direction it can take. And I think it's going to inspire someone out there. And what you're doing, especially even with your charity, giving back, is amazing. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. And, I've become a storyteller, something that I hate doing. But, every time I get the opportunity, something that my friend told me years ago, the things you're doing, the world needs to see it. So every time I get the opportunity to share my story, it's not about me. This is way outside of my comfort zone.
Oh
This is
yeah,
not something, but I know that by being visible, it helps my business, it helps my charity. But the ultimate goal is that it's going to transform the very lives that I want to do. So it's a snowball effect. So yeah, get out of your comfort zone, and I think have a purpose to live. It's great to aspire to have a house, to have a nice car. It's great. But is that the legacy you want to leave behind? I think everybody should define what their legacy looks like. A legacy doesn't have to be money or expensive. It can be teaching someone about work ethics, teaching someone to have a passion, teaching someone to overcome. It can be
definitely.
that simple.
We will definitely have your contact details in the show notes and also the name of your charity. If someone wants to donate, I think it's good to spread the word on that. So
Thank
for
you.
everyone, this has been the Trailblazers Experience podcast. Please share this podcast with another woman because it is about candid conversations with women. And we would like you to follow, subscribe, share, like across all platforms. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.